take an opportunity with this interview to see about students that don't actually go into music. So I actually interviewed a current first semester medical student that got a degree in both biology and music and has been in music since 5th grade, and comparing it to his professional studies now and how he feels more successful throughout it. Starting off with motivation, something that was really interesting that I never really thought about was motivation for music was far reaching. Like there was never like a point where he met the ceiling. And that kind of pushed him forward. He also, he was like, this might sound bad, so don't say this, but I'm gonna say it anyways. He thought, he found a lot of his motivation through his failures, but it was through his failures and through working with his peers and his teachers that he was able to overcome those and give out his best possible work. Another thing that was huge that we talked about was his time management skills, because obviously in a professional setting like medical school, you are given many hours of the day to just sit down and just kind of like study as well as like practicing in his undergraduate career. Something that he learned how to do was really carve out specific times, and that time is completely unmanaged. Like you sit in a practice room and it is up to you, or you sit down to study and it is up to you to figure out what you need to accomplish, what kind of goals you need to set, and just basic improvement overall. So he really connected that to music because sitting in a practice room with his instrument later reflected his studies in a more professional setting with studying for medical school. Another really interesting thing that we discussed was being a more effective communicator through music. He found that throughout the processes of auditions or performances or even playing with peers, that he was more comfortable later on communicating and performing in front of like professors for practicals and stuff like that. And I think one of my like favorite parts of the conversation too was when he was talking about how his colleagues like knew the science, but they didn't know like the emotional connecting bedside manner side that is so important in a medical profession, being able to connect with students, or not students, but his patients. And music really taught him how to communicate. And in fact, he even said that it was more difficult to communicate through music because you had this object in front of you, for instance, clarinet player. He had this object that he had to get through in order to communicate something. So I thought that was quite fascinating. Any questions?
Did he elaborate any more on like the connecting to like his patients and how music helped him with that?
Like in order to connect with them and everything?
Yeah, did he elaborate any more on that?
Yeah, so actually in practical settings, a lot of students would like kind of crumble at making like basic conversation. He felt more comfortable because of running like sectionals, for instance, being in a more leadership position. Also, he described auditions because, I mean, when you're in an audition setting and you have a panel of people in front of you and having to present something, that made him more comfortable in those sort of situations.
You mentioned he talked about not having a ceiling in music, that you can keep going. Did he mention seeing a parallel in his current field?
He did, because when you get a license to be a doctor, you actually have to take continuing education courses, and a lot of it is like learning the research and everything out in your field. So there was a similar like connection there, but then we also talked about the art form of it, how music is more of an emotional depiction than the science is as an art form, because science, we talked about this for a little bit, where medicine as an art form and science as a science. So medicine as an art form is more communication in the bedside manners of it, as opposed to music is more the emotional aesthetic kind of form of it.
Did he ever talk a little bit more in depth about how he got good at managing his time and what he needed to do?
I was going to say it's like through his failures, and he also learns through studying and practicing how to set distal and proximal goals. And a lot of his undergraduate, since he knew from the start he wanted to go into the medical profession, so it was like 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of professional ed. So he picked up music as a second degree as like a milestone to motivate him. Hey, music's gonna be a distal proximal goal, and then and it's gonna help me get to my farther thing. So it was kind of a stepping stone, but it helped him motivate him.